Our first case centers around a Japanese man named Kenji Goto, who in 2015 was executed in Syria by Islamic extremists. Kenji was a seasoned and well-respected journalist who had a long history of working in war-torn countries across the globe. Because of this, he decided to ignore multiple warnings from those cautioning him not to enter Syria, and this, unfortunately, would prove fatal. According to reports, Kenji was captured just a day after arriving in Syria, and later appeared in a ransom video alongside another captured Japanese citizen by the name of Haruna Yukawa. In it, the extremists demanded $200 million from the Japanese government in exchange for the men's lives. Of course, if you did keep up with the news around this time, you'll know that both men were unfortunately unable to be saved. Gruesome images of Yukawa's body were released. Then, shortly after, Kenji unfortunately met the same fate. Our second story tonight comes to us out of Pennsylvania in early 2015. 59-year-old David Kasich had been pulled over by Officer Lisa Merkel after she noticed an expired inspection sticker on his vehicle. For reasons unknown, rather than cooperating, Kasich decided to flee the scene, eventually leading the officer to his home. The events that followed were caught on camera, and eventually released to the public. The video begins with Kasich outside of his home, and the officer ordering him to get on the ground. Immediately after that, Kasich is tased and falls to his knees, soon ending up face down in the snow. The officer then begins to repeatedly order Kasich to show his hands. The man does appear to comply, but around the 45-second mark, we see the officer draw her gun and shoot the man twice in the back. And while he didn't immediately die on screen, he unfortunately died soon after. Just like many similar cases, this footage has sparked endless debate and controversy amongst those who have seen it. One side claims that the officer had no grounds to shoot the unarmed man, citing that he had been attempting to comply with her demands, but was in too much pain to do so as a result of being tased. On the other hand, the jury did decide that Merkel was not guilty of murder, pointing out that during certain moments, it was unclear if the man was reaching for a weapon. Of course, I do want to leave you to draw your own conclusions here, but be warned, the footage is highly disturbing. Our next story is similar to the one we just discussed, but has a very different outcome, and this time takes place in California in 2003. Much like David Kasich, 47-year-old Ricardo Serna was stopped by police following a traffic violation, but decided to flee the scene for unknown reasons. The officers eventually caught up with him, and the conflict that ensued resulted in an officer being shot by Ricardo, but luckily not fatally. Footage from the interrogation room shows us a very unexpected and disturbing turn of events. Ricardo is led into the room and handed a bottle of water before being left unattended. Immediately after this, Ricardo pulls out a gun, holds it to his temple, and quickly pulls the trigger without any hesitation, presumably choosing death over prosecution. Right after the gunshot, you can hear the officers' reactions off-screen. One asked the other where Ricardo could have possibly acquired the gun, to which the other officer responded that they had forgotten to search him for weapons before placing him into the room. It's unclear exactly how this footage was leaked online, but it can be found on multiple sites with a simple search. Our next entry is surveillance footage from a tragic event in China in late 2011. The video shows a 2-year-old girl aimlessly wandering through a busy market street after straying away from her mother. Unaware of the danger ahead, the girl walks into the path of a passing minivan and was knocked onto the ground. The vehicle momentarily pauses, with the girl now trapped below. Rather than getting out and checking what happened, the man carries on, running the girl over for a second time with the rear tires. As the girl begins to bleed out on the street, several people pass by, some even noticeably rubbernecking at the injured girl, but none stop to help her. Eventually, another vehicle does make its way down the street, also hitting the toddler before driving off. Several more people pass by until an elderly woman eventually notices the child and drags her to safety. The 2-year-old somehow managed to survive the ordeal, but died from her injuries in the hospital about a week later. The shocking footage first made its way onto the news and soon found itself online, where it can still be found to this day. In March 2016 in Taiwan, a mother and her 4-year-old daughter were making their way over to a nearby metro station. The girl was playfully riding her bicycle just several feet ahead of her mother before riding into a pothole. It's then that the mother noticed a middle-aged man approaching the girl, presumably to help her with her bike. But in a shocking turn of events, the man then pulled out a large meat cleaver and began to violently strike the girl in the neck. The horrified mother quickly sprang into action, attempting to stop the crazed man, but was ultimately unsuccessful. The child was decapitated shortly before concerned passers-by were able to aid the mother in subduing the attacker. Although the man was arrested shortly after, it still remains unclear what drove him to take the life of an innocent child, especially in such a gruesome manner. Aftermath and crime scene photos of this tragic event can be found online, but just like everything else we discussed today, they are extremely graphic and highly disturbing.